two most significant events in the story of Christianity are the crucifixion and the resurrection. Here at least is the symbolism of divinity, of life everlasting, the survival of the spirit after the suffering and death of the flesh. The exact nature of the crucifixion and evidence of the resurrection has, of course, often been challenged. But the Pesha technique of reading the Gospels could provide new facts and possibilities that may not have been considered before. Crucifixion was an intensely cruel method of execution. It took days, even weeks, for the victim to die. Pilate, when told that Jesus was dead after only a few hours on the cross, expressed considerable surprise.
Matthew's Gospel says that when Jesus was first put on the cross, he was offered poison, wine mixed with gall, that is poison, but he didn't take it. At 3 p.m., he was offered a sponge dipped in vinegar. Two later Christian writings say that it was poison and vinegar. And in any case, the background in Psalm 69, they gave me poison for my food and vinegar for my thirst, would suggest the extra ingredient. Jesus had just said, I thirst. The meaning would be that he was ready for the poison. In the Hellenistic world, suicide was considered a noble method of ending intolerable suffering. Socrates had drunk the hemlock, and on Masada in 74 AD, the Zealots had committed mass suicide rather than submit to the Roman yoke. After 6 hours on the cross and in despair, the cry, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Jesus was ready to end the suffering. He drank it, and then the Greek says he gave up the spirit. Now, the exact meaning of that is that he ceased to have the indwelling spirit and he became defiled. He had lost purity, he became defiled, but it actually means no more than that he had lost consciousness.
The two so-called thieves who were crucified beside Jesus were in fact zealots. They were known as thieves because of the way they'd illegally put money into supporting an uprising. The Romans did not execute people simply for theft. Jesus, of course, had also been accused of zealotry, of being a military king of the Jews, and his own party had turned him in. With the next day being the Sabbath, the rule was that bodies could not be left on the crosses overnight. So they were taken down, and the legs of the two zealots were broken to prevent them from escaping from the tomb where they were to be buried alive. It looked as though Jesus was already dead. He was wrapped in grave clothes and put in the tomb with the other two. But the poison he'd swallowed had merely rendered him unconscious. His friends, aware of what had happened, and with the connivance of the two zealots, managed to smuggle in among the grave clothes a strong purgative of aloes mixed with myrrh to help soothe the internal inflammation. During the night, one of the men who were buried with him squeezed the aloes into Jesus' mouth. The poison was expelled and Jesus began to recover. The three of them succeeded in moving the stone enough to give a signal to Mary Magdalene, who had been waiting outside. She fetched Peter and some of the other disciples, and together they managed to get Jesus out and carry him away.
In the Acts of the Apostles, there are numerous occasions when Jesus appeared to his disciples, to Peter and especially to Paul. In Corinth, for instance, he appeared to Paul one night and said, "Don't be afraid, I have many people in this city." In Caesarea, he appeared to Paul and said, "Take courage, Paul, because you have to go to Rome." These are real appearances of the real Jesus. He stayed with his friends and was with them, and they are able to meet with him for guidance and direction. When it says that he descended into heaven, the meaning is, in the exact sense, that he went into the monastery sanctuary and was kept there because it was heaven, because the priests and Levites were thought of as gods and angels. They had been entered into and possessed by heavenly spirits, and they were talked about in that way. In the Gospel of Philip, the newly discovered Gospel of Philip, it says, "Those who believe that Jesus died first and then rose again are in error, because he rose first and then he died." He would have remained in Rome and presumably died at an advanced age. This history is not invented. It's not speculation. It is read from the Gospels and Acts by using this Pesher technique, which is shown to us or implied from the scrolls. The reader who knows it expects inside information, has exact knowledge of what terms mean. He expects it to be perfectly accurate, to be historically true, to be consistent, but he doesn't expect the supernatural.
Jesus was made to suffer by religious fantasy, bigotry, and hatred in the name of holiness. Some of that fantasy still persists, obscuring the message that Jesus and his followers tried to put across 2,000 years ago.
Perhaps in a world come of age, we may be at the point where all of us can learn what the real sense of Christianity is, without the miracle stories, the children's stories. Or it may be that we have arrived at a point of such diversity that we can't go back to a language that was current in the Hellenistic period. Perhaps we've gone beyond it. But at any rate, with the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls, we really can now, for the first time, find the historical Jesus. And he's been there in the New Testament all the time.
But Barbara Thiering's challenging arguments and careful researches may not be easily accepted, either by members of the established church or the current band of scholars.
There are still a very large amount of Dead Sea Scrolls unpublished, and we don't know what they contain. And all our theories, even mine, must be preceded and followed by question marks until at least we have all the relevant evidence.
The question is, should these discoveries be dismissed as destructive and irrelevant, or do they help us to a new and better understanding of Christianity? It's a question to which only you can provide the answer in your own personal way. That is the riddle of the Dead Sea Scrolls.